Hello, former Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode of the Weekly Crusaders. My name's Sean Waskrug, with me as always is Brian Michaels. And today we're going to be talking about two movies that came out during the week of April 16th through the 22nd. We've got basically two comedies this week. One is more well-known and I would say beloved by most, if not the best, considered the best of the actual trilogy of what it's called. And then another one is I'm not saying it is. I'm saying
Some people think it is, yes.
yes. And the other one is a film that, for all the kind of correct reasons, was greatly overlooked, but it's actually a relatively solid film in the genre that it's doing. Which we're going to start off with that one, and that is Brian's pick. And Brian picked the body swapped comedy 17 Again. 17 Again came out August 17th, 2009, had a budget of $40 million, had a weekend opening of 23.72 million. It was number one its opening weekend, its only week at the number one spot, and had a finished box office of 136.32 million, 64.17 million domestic, and 72.15 million international. Even though that's a really big box office number, I do feel like this movie was relatively overlooked. I feel like that box office number is mainly the Zac Efron girl crowd,
Absolutely.
and not the reason that you would want to see it, which is, it being a fun, body swap movie. But Brian, take it away. This is your film.
Yeah, so 17 Again is it's kind of, it's that body swap gray area because there's no swapping, there's no other body switching
It
into,
is.
but they kind of group these all
big.
together. Yeah,
It's
it's like
big.
big, yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, except the opposite of big. But yeah, it's that kind of movie. It's a fantasy, I guess you could maybe call it sci-fi, whatever you want to call it, comedy. But it was very much viewed as just a kid's film, a teen film, a film for Zac Efron fans. And those are the people who went and saw it and made it what box office it made. So it wasn't a flop. It still made some money. But I think most of the adult crowd ignored it for that reason. I think they're like, oh yeah, it's Zac Efron. We want to see the High School Musical kid in this movie. For anybody who's not seen this movie,
granted, you and I were both in that same boat. Neither
hey,
one of us
I think
really.
I don't remember if I saw this in theaters or not, but I saw it pretty early on, and I was actually quite impressed by it.
I
But then
had
again,
not seen this until about, I think, 2 years ago.
at the time, I had a kid. Now she was way too young to be like, "Oh, Zac Efron," but she still like enjoyed the High School Musical movies, so I probably watched it mainly because of her the first time. So you're probably right on that account. For anyone who's not seen it, basically there's Matthew Perry, plays his character who basically he's really depressed with what his life has become. He was the high school basketball star. He was poised to have this great life. The scouts were out to see him at his final game, and then he finds out his girlfriend's pregnant, and he basically does the right thing. He just abandons the game to go be with his girlfriend. They get married, raise a family, have their daughter or son. The son was older. Yeah.
I think the daughter's older.
Is the daughter older? I don't know.
The daughter's definitely older.
To raise his family. But then he spends his entire life, looking back at the what ifs, the regrets, like what could my life could have been, instead of this. And so, he gets depressed with his life. Then one day, basically, it's the janitor. Well, this the mysterious janitor shows up, who basically gives him a chance to try over again, to relive his life. And he doesn't send him back in time. Instead, he just puts him back in his 17-year-old body. And so he becomes Zac Efron at this point, who then gets a chance to kind of redo his life, to redo high school. But then, of course, like every movie of this type, he, learns what really matters to him and how his life was better this way, blah, blah, blah. You learn the lessons. That's the basic plot of the movie. What gets this movie for me, I think the comedy in this movie is very well done. I think that it is not a teen movie, not like a teen High School Musical, movie at all. I think it's a lot smarter than people give it credit for. I think that Zac Efron does a great job in what is essentially his first starring role that's not a High School Musical movie.
Was this before? This was after Hairspray, wasn't it?
He was Hairspray. He was not the star of that movie.
Well, no, but I mean, he was probably the one name that really kind of grew from Hairspray.
Yeah, he was in Hairspray, in a small role. He had done the High School Musical movies, of course. He was in a movie called Me and Orson Welles, which he had a large part in, but it was a small movie. This is like his first big studio Zac Efron upfront starring movie. And I mean, he went on to do a lot of other ones after that, obviously, but I think this is one that I think showed me and a lot of people, it's like, well, yeah, he's the attractive teenage kid the girls are swooning over, but he's also, I think, not only a good actor, but I thought he has some great comedic timing. And I thought actually that him and Matthew Perry were a great match for the same character. Just I don't know if he was trying to imitate Matthew Perry or if it just came natural that way, but I thought he did a very good job. I'll stop talking for a little bit and let you give your thoughts.
Yeah, this was one of those that because of Zac Efron, because like I think I remember watching High School Musical and like just going like, okay, it's a Disney movie.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
didn't hate him, but they're like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not at that age where I don't care about this, but I was like, I don't understand why everyone's losing their minds
Hmm.
over this. But I really did like him in Hairspray. And I love Matthew Perry. Chandler has always been my favorite friend
Yep.
of the Friends groups. And I actually, for the most part, always enjoy anything he's in, whether it's his movies like Fools Rush In, Three to Tango, even the whole 9 yards, but whole 10 yards was not good. So anytime Matthew Perry's in something, especially we've talked ad nauseum about his failed TV shows that you and I always have liked his shows. So seeing him in this movie, I was excited, but it's always one of those things where, especially in a movie where whether it's a not a body swap, but a
Yeah.
age swap, I guess would be the right term in a way. I knew going in he wasn't going to be in the movie that much. So to me, that was like a downgrade selling point because it's like I would rather see Matthew Perry than Zac Efron at that time. But yeah, so it was one of those was like, well, yeah, Matthew Perry's in it. I was like, yeah, but I know Matthew Perry's only going to be in the beginning, and then he'll be like maybe at the tail end of the movie, and it's mainly a Zac Efron film. So I didn't really care to watch it, and like I think it was like about 2 years ago, I was kind of going through a bunch of films and just writing stuff down. I went to you and I was like, hey, I was like, I know you've seen most of these. Which ones should I focus on first? And you were like 17 again. I was like,
You're like,
really?
really?
Like, okay. And I
Like
watched it
you'll
and
like this.
I actually really did enjoy it. Now, do I think Zac Efron at the beginning of the film should have abandoned the game to go
She'll
be
still be there in an hour, right?
what's that?
She'll still be there in an hour.
Exactly. She ain't running away, man. But number two, you would have gotten a scholarship. You probably maybe would have gone pro, which would have put them in a better life, and stuff. But I'm not. That's a whole other side quest thing. But it's like, dude, the game was almost near the end. You could go to her house after the game. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
You
they
didn't have
got,
to
they got to try
run
and
your
raise a
whole life.
kid while she's got a mom and he's got if he's in college, it just makes it difficult. So
Yeah,
I
I
understand, but yeah, I see your
I
point.
get that part, but like if she's not going to be doing anything with her life, if she's not going to college either, she can just come to the university with him and shit. Because it made it seem like they're not doing college ever, and so I was like, "Then take her with you, kind of thing. But yeah, that part was just kind of okay. I don't buy that, but present day stuff. I mean, you have that normal stuff like oh, what could have been? Oh, my life's this, and now I'm working at a crappy job and I'm underappreciated and him that love for him and his wife played by Leslie Mann that Brian loves.
Apparently Sean doesn't. Okay, cool.
No, she's great, but you have like you like have like a crush on her.
Leslie Mann is his. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
She's on the list.
Yeah. But yes, I mean you have all that stuff where his life's like in his mindset, his life could not get any lower. And so when he does transfer into that Zac Efron, age, it's a funny thing, and that's one of the things that I think at the time, which I mean, by the time I watched this, I already knew, but like at that time, Zac Efron was pretty boy singer dancer guy, and even in a Hairspray, same thing, singer dancer guy. This was the first film that really was like, hey, Zac Efron could be funny. And I didn't notice that till Neighbors when he was like out of the like
Mhm.
High School Musical limelight. And you finally look at Zac Efron, like, okay, this guy actually can do some stuff, and he's actually funny, and I actually enjoy him. Which you and I have gone through this, and I'm sure we're not the only guys. We went through this with Leo. We went through this with Channing Tatum. We went through this with so many heartthrob actors, where it's just like, oh my god, I'm so tired of just seeing these guys in chick flick rom coms. Like, ugh. And then they finally do a comedy where they're okay with making fun of themselves. You're like, you know what? I like that guy. And then we started championing him. We were championing Zac Efron last year. We
Yep.
were like, he really just needs a movie that lets someone showcase how great he is. But I think what makes this movie great in a lot of ways is because Matthew Perry's best friend is
Thomas Lennon.
Thomas Lennon. I almost said Lemon. I was like, that's not right.
Who I know originally from The State, and their whole group has done tons of stuff, but then you know him mostly from...
I know him from Reno 911, but he's also just in a ton of stuff, kind of thing. But the funny thing about this is a great callback is Matthew Perry and Thomas Lennon are best friends in this movie. But then they both ended up going on to do the Odd Couple TV show, which only went like 2 seasons, and I enjoyed it.
Which
but,
oddly is the one Matthew Perry show I have not watched.
Yeah, I was like, I enjoyed it, but it's funny that these two ended up in the future, like almost like what 10 years later, 8 to 10 years later, they're again playing the Odd Couple, and I thought that was fun.
I thought they had good chemistry.
Yeah. But like I knew I was fine with this movie when we get to the one big scene, which is when Efron shows up at Lennon's house and Lennon thinks he's a burglar. and they start fighting throughout the house because Thomas Lennon's a huge nerd and he's got like Star Wars toys and like Lord of the Rings memorabilia and all this kind of stuff. And just watching that fight, and it's hilariously funny. And I knew while watching that I was laughing during it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be okay. Like this movie's gonna be okay because it's one thing to have Thomas Lennon and Matthew Perry together, but then if Zac Efron is able to balance with Lennon, then that's great too. And that's what kept this movie going. Because yes, you have the typical, and I will say typical because it always happens where it's either the mom, a younger version of the mom, or the daughter. The daughter's gonna fall for her dad in a way, and it's like, okay, which Michelle Trachtenberg I enjoy. And we were actually talking about this. Was like, what happened to her?
I'm not a fan of hers. I'm glad she went away.
Well, I watched Buffy, so I had her through Buffy and then Euro Trip and stuff like that. But because like the high school stuff is fine, but it's funny watching Zac Efron do this like trying to act older but then trying to act younger kind of thing. And I do think that one scene in the cafeteria, the bully scene, I think is actually really well done. I think that's a really good scene. But yeah, there's a lot of good just storytelling, especially with him and Leslie Mann and stuff like that, which you have to do that thing in your brain when you have these kind of movies where you have to kind of turn your brain off on why wouldn't they recognize him, because don't they have pictures of him?
Well, and she even says like, "Oh my gosh,
she does.
So
I'm talking about
just like my husband when he was young."
What I'm talking about is like Thomas Lennon didn't recognize him right away. It's like, dude, you've been best friends with him your whole life. You would recognize your best friend like that. And there's his coach didn't recognize him, but his coach remembers that character or remembers that person, but he doesn't remember that's literally him. Kind of thing. You got to kind of like, especially since he's got pictures of himself literally in like high school, like trophy case kind of thing. So you got to kind of like just like turn your brain off of that. But overall, it's an enjoyable, fun film. It doesn't go the level of raunchiness that in the 2000s did, because that's not that kind of movie. But it still is a fun film, and even at the end, in the court scene, it allowed Efron to really act emotionally.
Yeah, it really
did. It was a really great scene. It's a really great scene.
That's the thing is I enjoyed this movie for the body swap comedy that it was, but I think that the reason I enjoyed this movie as much as I did is because as a father, it's like I loved how they played that angle of it. It wasn't just him, getting to be a kid again and the raunchiness and whatever it is and having fun and partying. It was him there trying to help his kids. It's like every time he had a conversation with his daughter, one of these heartfelt conversations, or when he was dealing with his son and realizing, how he feels about, being the pressure to play basketball and all this kind of thing, and just dealing with bullies and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like every time you had one of those conversations with them, which I thought he did very well, as kind of sounding like he was an old soul in a young body. And when he was doing parenting, and just you could see how much he felt for them and how much he worried about them and how much he wanted to help them. And that's just somewhere where this movie just hit me on another level, just because of where my life was when I saw this movie.
Yeah, which for me, I just took it as like, that's a solid performance, a solid thing, but I don't have that.
Yeah.
Every movie is going to have something that's going to connect to you in a way that's not going to connect with 10 other people. There are movies like that with me that Brian's like, dude, I just don't get why you like this movie. Because of this, The Wrestler, for example.
There
We
you
had
go.
that
Perfect
conversation
example. Perfect
in the
example.
second or third episode of Weekly Crusaders. You're like, it's fine.
It's like, I can respect that you love this
Yeah.
movie. I get it, but it doesn't hit me quite on the same level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not that 17 again didn't hit me because I thought
Right.
it was a fun
It
film.
just hits you different.
Exactly. That's the wonders of movies. It might hit 10% of the people watching it a very, very special way, and the other 90% it just not necessarily goes over their head, but they don't give a shit.
Yeah. If I had one
Yeah.
negative of the movie, and it's not even super negative, it's just one thing that didn't work as well for me. I thought that the Thomas Lennon geek stuff was a bit over the top. Now the way he was dressing up and some of the toys and stuff he had around the house, and the bed was a land speeder and all this kind of stuff. Okay, they maybe overdid this a little bit, but fine, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
But then, like when the principal started speaking Elvish with him, and that's how he like woos her, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
No, let that happen. Let that happen. Now him and them both sleeping in
well,
the
Laura
land
Hardin, by the
speeder
way, we'll
at the
prop
end of
we
the
had another movie we
movie.
watched, yeah.
Yeah, her sleeping in the land speeder at the end of the movie. That's the part where I was like, okay, no, there's no lady would stay in that bed. But them speaking Elvish and stuff like that part I was fine with. It was more Thomas Lennon's character creepily like doing stuff to try to basically badger her into a date. That was because like nowadays you can't do that. Like you'd be a stalker, you would be called out on all this other shit. But it's like that moment when she finally was like, able to like bring down her shield and go, oh, I found someone who's as big a nerd as me, but I can't show it. Where he just shows it. He's unabashedly not afraid to let his geek flag fly. Where she has to keep it all contained, but then she could finally open up. Go, oh wow, this is my person in a way, and I actually thought that was a really well done scene.
Well, plus her whole thing is like, as a principal, she's like, I can't be seen dating, a student's parent. But then again, at the end of the movie, I mean, we don't know what happens, but I think because Efron just disappears, so the
Well,
new
he
kid's
does the
just
same thing he
gone.
does at the beginning of the movie. He bails on the big game again.
That's what I'm saying. But after that point, like no one would ever see him again, and so
No,
like, okay,
yeah, he just went
but
away.
yet she's probably still dating him. So isn't she like, where's your son?
Yeah, you're gonna have to. That is there is some conversations there.
At some point, the conversation has to be had. Yeah,
there needs to be a conversation there. Either he went to go live with his mom.
No, at some point, I think she has to have a real conversation. For like, look, you saw him. Look, this is young Matthew Perry.
Here's a picture of him here.
You're not going to believe any of this, but this is the truth.
Yeah. Basically, he went to the moon and he did not come back. That's
He went to live on the farm.
That's an old Simpsons reference for anyone who didn't catch that. But yeah, it's a solid film. It's one of those that's like, I don't want to say it's underrated, but it's one of those that like me, I was not a part of the Efron craze. And even though I love Matthew Perry, I knew how much he was going to be in the film that I just kind of was like, I'll check it out at some point. And then all of a sudden it's, 10 plus years later and I never watched it. And then, just watched it. Cause at this point, my mindset on Efron was different. And obviously I still love Matthew Perry, and Leslie Mann's pretty much almost great in everything she's in, except for like
the bubble.
Yeah, I was gonna say the bubble.
And that wasn't her fault.
That was a collective effort of just shit. But this is a movie that if you guys haven't checked out, this is a very solid film. It's not gonna blow you away, but for the cast and the story and everything like that, it's an enjoyable film, and I liked it quite a bit. And even Brian picking it, I was like, man, I think I've watched this movie like 3 times since I watched this like 2 years ago. I was like, I don't think I need to watch it again. But even though, because we're shooting this late, I still did go back and rewatch it because I was like, got nothing better to do. I'll have fun to watch this again.
I did also enjoy like when he first goes back, and of course, as an adult trying to look at youth culture, he tries like he gets like how to dress and how to act and everything by watching like K-Fed.
What's funny is he basically
shows up like the worst outfit. You're like, oh.
What's funny to me, and it might not be the intent, but because it's Matthew Perry as well, he basically dresses like Joey in Friends when Joey's trying to act younger. And he's got like the hat on and the Knicks jersey tucked in. He's like, PlayStation Pop. That's why it's funnier to me. I don't think that's anything at all what they were trying to do, but because of Matthew Perry being in the movie, I connected. I was like, oh, he's being Joey. Yeah. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Anything else you'd like to add for 17 again?
Nope, that's it.
All right, we're gonna go ahead over to my film.
On hang on, I just had it a second ago. It's not free anywhere right now, but when it pops up somewhere, it's worth
I
watching.
will say we've abandoned that part
We
of our.
forgot that. We should have done that.
We
Yeah.
haven't been doing that for like any of the episodes. On Weekend Crusaders, we'd always tell you where you guys could find these movies and stuff like that. We have not done that. We really need to get back to doing
I'll
that.
just save it some time. The other one's not available free anywhere right now either, but you've all
Oh,
seen
okay.
it
My,
anyway.
my pick's not anywhere.
Yeah,
Really?
but they've all seen it, so whatever.
I thought it was on Netflix. But anyway.
Not at the moment.
Anyway, my pick is from a trilogy that I have something special to say about this trilogy, but it's from the Cornetto trilogy. We're talking Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz came out April 20th, 2007, had a budget of $16 million, had a weekend opening of $5.84 million. It was number 6 its opening weekend, its highest ranking, and had a finished box office of $80.74 million, $23.64 million domestic, and $57.11 million international, which those numbers shock me. As much as everyone loves Hot Fuzz, I honestly was shocked that this movie didn't get over 100 mil.
No, this is a movie. I'm surprised it made as much as it did because Shaun of the Dead was such a small cult movie. Like most
then
people didn't.
it should have been bigger coming into Hot Fuzz because of how many
But
people.
but even then, though, I think a lot of people still were on the like Shaun of the Dead was kind of just hitting popularity when Hot Fuzz came out. Because I remember when this came out, and it's like so those people who had seen Hot Fuzz like or had seen Shaun of the Dead were like, oh my gosh, this is great, a new movie, let's go see it. But I think a lot of the general public had no idea what it was and weren't familiar with Shaun of the Dead or had heard of it but not seen it. And so Hot Fuzz was still kind of while it was on the upswing of Edgar Wright and all his stuff. So I think that, after that it got bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think that this was still pretty early on and it had a small audience.
I still think that it should have made more money.
Oh, it should absolutely it should.
I'm disappointed in the Americas because internationally it was fine. It was in the US that it didn't make money. Now, for the most part, unless you just really, really don't like Edgar Wright, everyone loves the Cornetto trilogy, which is Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and World's End. For me, I don't like World's End. I don't think it's good. I think it's easily the weakest. So for me,
Agreed.
I always remove World's End out of the Cornetto trilogy, and I slide Paul in. So because Paul's still Peg and
it's not Edgar Wright.
But to me, that's my 3 favorite films with these guys. So I try to pretend that World's End doesn't have because I'm sorry. Did you like World's End? Because I did not find it enjoyable at all.
World's End, I did not like at all when I first watched it. In the rewatches, I think I enjoy it more, but it's still easily my least favorite of the 3.
Yeah. And I always have a special place for Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead's always going to be my favorite one.
Yep.
And what's funny is I watched Hot Fuzz, I think right when it came out, and I remember going, it's okay, but I think, and I've always said this about Edgar Wright, is I always feel like, except for Shaun of the Dead, Edgar Wright doesn't know how to end his movies. Because he always just goes over the top crazy action to end the films, and the rest of the movie isn't that. So it's a complete drop, it's a complete drastic change. Like Baby Driver is the same way. Now, I've grown into actually liking that, but at first, it's such a jarring shift. That's whoa, we've jumped into a whole other different kind of film here in the last act, and it's just it doesn't mesh well with the rest of the act. Now, Scott Pilgrim, that was fine in terms of flowing with that because it's a game. But
for me, I like Baby Driver. I do agree that it does kind of ramp up suddenly at the end there. But the better example for me is Last Night in Soho. But yeah,
and Last Night in Soho.
That just kind of goes woo.
But that's always the thing with his. Is I love Edgar Wright movies, but I feel like he has a hard time finding balance throughout his films. That when he gets to the third act, he just goes, and it's no, dude, you gotta balance that shit through. But I still enjoy the films, and Hot Fuzz was always the ones where I was when I first saw it, maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset to watch it because I was man, this is really just kind of boring until the third act it explodes and goes crazy. But now I watch it and I actually really love the movie. So it took me a few times to watch it and actually appreciate it. And for people who don't know what the plot of Hot Fuzz, you got Simon Pegg, who plays Nicholas Angel, which is such a weird name for Simon Pegg in this movie for some reason. And he's basically super cop. He's got the most. He's like what 400% like more arrests than anyone else in Britain, and he basically makes all the other cops look bad. So they basically they promote him and transfer him to like this small town, like the safest town in like what Britain or whatever the hell the thing is. And they basically send him basically to purgatory over there because there's nothing really to do and stuff like that. He has to partner with the captain's son, played by Nick Frost, who plays Danny Butterman, which that's a great name right there for Nick Frost. But as the story unfolds, you find out that there is this underlying like story. There's this underlying crime and like conspiracy that happens in this town for the reason why the town is so perfect. And while it unfolds, craziness ensues into a hugely over the top third act. But like I said, what makes these movies great and what makes these movies rewatchable over and over and over again is the amazing chemistry between Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. They had it in Shaun of the Dead. They have it here. I think that's why I don't like World's End as much, because I feel like their chemistry was. It wasn't like that it wasn't there in World's End. Is that they had so many other people in the mix that it felt like they were trying to keep them separate, which is why I love Paul so much, because it's back to just being those two, and then you add a third party with Seth Rogen as Paul the alien, and that's why I always feel like Simon or Paul's the third Cornetto trilogy for me. But what's funny is like this is another one of those movies that you and I love, that like you watch it back when it came out and you recognize Pegg and you recognize like Timothy Dalton, you recognize like the big name people, but then you watch it now, you're like, oh, there's Martin Freeman. Oh, there's Olivia Colman. Oh, there's the Hound from Game of Thrones. It's like all of a sudden you start seeing all these people that you know now that you didn't know back in 2007. And it makes it for a lot more fun. Like Can't Hardly Wait is one that you and I love to point out, because there's just so many people in that movie that weren't anything then. And now it's like, dude, this is a stacked cast. But yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to you now for Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, so Hot Fuzz, I had kind of gotten on the wave pretty early with Shaun of the Dead, because I had heard about it and I tracked it down and I watched it. And I love Shaun of the Dead. Still my favorite of the trilogy. And then, of course, I went back and I found this TV show Spaced, which if you not watched Spaced, go watch it. It's Edgar Wright's TV show, which he made with Pegg and Frost before he ever made Shaun of the Dead. Hilarious show, especially lots of geek references. So if you like those, you'll like this. I think it was a one season show. It was like 10 episodes or something. Go check it out.
It is.
So Hot Fuzz came out, and so I immediately saw this as early as I could. And I really did enjoy it, but it didn't. It's kind of the same thing where it didn't quite hit the heights of Shaun of the Dead for me. I think part of it is because it was, they weren't Pegg and Frost, weren't best friends. They put them together as partners, but they were kind of like, not on the same wavelength. They weren't together, and so they didn't have that camaraderie, which is what made kind of the Shaun of the Dead what it was.
Wait, because they were at odds until about halfway through the film.
Yeah, so I mean, I still enjoyed it, and the comedy was good and things like that. But like you said, it is kind of a slower film. It for most of the movie, and it ramps up big time in the third act. But in this movie, I think that's kind of the point of it, because part of this movie is basically parodying these big action films. Of course, they talk about Point Break and Bad Boys, and there's Bad Boys 2.
I pin in that. You and I are going to have a conversation about that.
We'll put a pin in that. But I think because it was kind of being a bit of a parody, at least at times, of those kind of films, that's kind of why that third act went the way it did.
Yeah.
So there's that explanation. Like you, I enjoyed a lot watching just the cast in this, not just the big names, like you said, the Timothy Daltons, and the Cate Blanchett shows up, things like that. But then all the people you didn't know at the time. There's multiple people from Game of Thrones. There's Patty Considine from House of the Dragon. There's Paul Freeman, who's Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark, is in this movie. That's a coup right there. I love seeing him in this.
I still think a lot of people don't realize Cate Blanchett's in this movie.
Yeah, well, because she has the mask on the whole time. Well, also have Peter Jackson is the dude dressed like Santa Claus in the movie.
I didn't know that.
And there's some other Garth Jennings. There's a couple other directors, friends of his, are in this movie. But yeah, there's tons of people in this movie. Stephen Merchant is in this movie very early in his career.
Yeah, he's the goose guy.
Yeah. So yeah, just watching this cast now watching this movie now is a lot different than watching it back when you first saw it. You're like, oh, like you said, you're playing spot the cameos when they aren't even cameos, just people early roles in their careers.
Yeah.
So
and I loved the Andes, Rafe Spall and
Rafe Spall, yeah.
I love those two.
Yeah. So I mean, just the cast is great to watch. The story, it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
both this and World's End, they kind of have the whole town like, oh, for the greater good, and I didn't really care about the whole story, but I just had fun watching the individual scenes and the chemistry between the main characters.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, because I know I'll forget about it if we don't bring it up right now. Does it bug you to no end that Danny just jumps over Bad Boys 1? Because he's like, Bad Boys 2, and point blank, like, dude, what the fuck? What about Bad Boys? You
Well,
can't watch Bad Boys 2 without Bad Boys.
well, I can tell you the answer to that question is if you're just asking, like, I bet he's a fan of Bad Boys 1, but I think Bad Boys 2 is, especially in the context of this movie, Bad Boys 2 took things 10
I
levels up
agree.
in terms of the mayhem, as they call it, and the chaos and just like the over the top. Because the first one was action-filled movie. It's Michael Bay's first movie, and it was just full of action and comedy, and it was tons
It's
of fun.
more grounded. It's
Yeah.
more grounded.
The second one was like, we're just gonna go off the rails with this shit, so over the top in every single scene. If you think I'm gonna crash one car, no, I'm gonna crash 20 of them. And and the camera movement, the spinning around people, stuff like that. By then, Bay had become Bay, as we know him
Yeah.
now. And so I think that's why they chose Bad Boys
And
2, is just because that's like the extreme action.
I don't disagree because Bad Boys 2 is my favorite one. But it's like you don't start someone on Empire Strikes Back without watching New Hope. You don't watch Terminator 2 without watching Terminator 1. It's like that bugs the fuck
No,
out of
yes,
me
to
every time.
introduce him to 2, but at the same time, it's like, oh, he's not gonna watch, multiple movies. He doesn't care about character development. We just wanna watch action. Here you go.
Still, every time that irks me, it's like, dude, you gotta watch Bad Boys first. You gotta know this character's dynamics before you just throw him into Bad Boys 2. But yeah, like I said, it's fun going back and watching this now. Honestly, it's because of Game of Thrones. You start noticing so many more people now. But a lot of these actors, they're either bigger now, like Olivia Colman, who's like, constantly nominated for Oscars now, and especially the character that she plays in the movie. But it's fun going back and watching them and seeing that. And the third act, I get why they go the way they do, but it's like you can't have a shootout like that and not have a single fucking person die. And I get that the whole point is that he arrests them all at the end, and they all have like their
Yeah.
mugshot stuff. But it's like,
And
just
also, I can
go
see
for
taking
it.
the third act and going like another level into this big action climax, but then it felt too long. It kept going.
Well, it's way too long.
I'm like, okay.
Way too
Now,
long.
like the extra fight in the was it the cemetery, the park,
Like the
whatever?
model town
The
kind
model
of
town, that's
thing.
what it was. And I'm just like, okay, come on.
Yeah, it's like, which I thought was cool because you had like this Godzilla kind
Yeah.
of look thing, but then it's like we're like 20 plus minutes into this scene now. Because like I think it's not necessarily that I think that scene is bad. I think the
I don't think it was
grocery.
bad. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like it's ran its course. I think the grocery scene went too long because they're in there and there's like 3 separate fight scenes inside the store. And I think that is where it kind of not necessarily overstates its welcome. I think it's like, okay, you're starting to thin. Like it's one thing with John Wick, because John Wick it builds and levels and flows and it goes to different sets and stuff like that. But it's
Mhm.
like by the time you get to the car chase, and then you got the model thing, and that it's like okay. I mean, I'm still enjoying it, but I'm feeling it wear on me, which Baby Driver does the same thing, where it's like, where's the end point coming? Like, we got to get to an end point. Like, you got to take a break. Like, even in pro wrestling, you got to have a rest hold at some point to let everyone come down so they can come back up again. But yeah, no, I mean, Hot Fuzz is one of those movies that like it took me a while to come around to, but now I watch it and have a blast. And even watching it the other night, I was like, why did I dislike this movie? But then you watch it like, okay, I see the points. It's still really good, but it's not Shaun of the Dead. Shaun
It's
of the
not
Dead
bad.
is a near perfect horror comedy in my eyes, and I will watch Shaun of the Dead 100% of the time if I have to choose between that and Hot Fuzz. But I would never watch World. I think I've only seen that World's End like twice, and that's enough for me. Especially
I think it's the same, but twice, maybe 3 times. We're
I
probably
hate
yeah.
the ending of that film too. I so hate that ending. But anyway, anything else you'd like to add with Hot Fuzz?
Nope.
All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you guys did, go and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Weekly Crusaders. And of course, you have to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next week, I'm pulling up the list here. Let's see, it is the 23rd to the 29th. Oh, yes, that's right. We talked about this earlier. Describe yours, because I feel like I can describe it. I feel like I'm going to describe it wrong.
I forgot what week that
Starts
is.
with an O. You've been wanting to talk about this movie for a while.
Gosh, I have completely blanked out. Okay, I'm gonna have to look it up.
It's a name.
Oh, this one. This one. Yeah, I was thinking of the other movie. I forgot I switched.
Like, come on, Brian.
Yeah. Well, behind the curtain, I originally was gonna pick a movie. Sean couldn't really find the movie, but he also loves that, so we moved that over to make his pick, and I picked a new one because I had a second one. This movie is a unfairly maligned comedy because of a guy who's not known for doing comedy made another shitty one that gets grouped together with this. It doesn't deserve
Which we talked about on the Weekend Crusaders.
Yes, but this is it's a hilarious movie. It's a farce, a style you don't see a whole lot in movies, and it's a ton of fun. It's again kind of like the Zac Efron thing. I think most people have not seen it, but most people I know who have seen it have enjoyed it very much.
Part of me is like, I feel like I saw it back when it came out, but I don't remember a single part of this movie. So it's going to feel like a first time watch for me. And then mine is a movie that I've always remember seeing the third act on TV, on like Saturday, like afternoon, like TV, like movie of the week kind of thing. It's a 1980s, what you call it, a sex romp? It's not a rom-com.
I don't know if I call sex comedy. It's a comedy. It's a teen comedy. We'll put it there and go from there. Yeah.
1980s teen comedy that we both really enjoy, and I had a list of like 15 movies for this week, but as soon as I saw this one, I was like, this is the one I want to talk about because I haven't seen it in forever. So figure out what those movies are. I think you can probably figure out Brian's, but mine you're not gonna figure out.
Probably not.
As well as we got reviews for Evil Dead Rise, which, Brian, real quick, what'd you think of Evil Dead Rise?
I enjoyed it. Not great. It's fine.
Also, Ghosted, Brian.
Oh, that was disappointing.
And Quasi, Brian.
Oh, that was really disappointing. That when we get to the end of the year, our most disappointed list, it's going to be on there. I don't know how high it'll be on there, but it's going to be on there.
Yes. So we have reviews for all three of those on the channel, as well as our this week's episode of Cinemasochism, where we talk about the movie that I chose, which we'll go ahead and drop the title here. It's Hell Comes to Frogtown. This is going to be a fun episode. As well as next week, we'll have another episode of Cinemasochism, and next week's movies.
There's not much. There's Sisu coming out,
which is not in my area, so I can't.
What's weird is my theater doesn't get it on Friday, but there's a screening of it on Monday, so I'm going to go see that.
Yeah.
And then there's a Polite Society, which again is a small movie we're not going to review on this channel, but it's kind of a lull week before Guardians next week. So.
Exactly. So hopefully, all these movies that came out this week, well, basically it's Evil Dead Rise, can build up their box office for one more week before Guardians comes in and blows it out of the water. But yes, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm Sean Waskrug. That's Brian Michaels. We are the Movie Crusaders. And until next time, in case we don't see you, go watch some movies and go have some fun.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.